Yeah, I do feel slightly intimidated being with...
I'll put them on.
No, that won't stop me being intimidated by a cameraman of your distinction.
Oh, come on.
Barrie Dodd, thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure.
I suppose I probably need to sort of get you to give me some kind of scope of your career, when it started, how it started.
It's a bit of a long story, yeah?
And then the journey it took you on.
It's a bit of a long story.
All right, we got plenty of time. What was your first job?
Well, I started in film, especially in the 60s. It was always a fascination to me. Exotic, so it seemed. And I was very, very lucky, very lucky. There's a few times in your life when a door opens and you can either go and through it or not. You can make those decisions. And it was pure luck that I had a landlord, because in those days I was living in a bedsit in a house where the landlord, one day came up and he said, "What do you do?" And I was working in the travel business at the time. He said, "Do you like it?" I said, "Well, not really. It sounds exotic, but it isn't." You sit at a desk, basically. I said, "What do you do?" He said, "I'm in the film business." I said, "Oh, that sounds very interesting." And he actually was a puppeteer. His father had made a thing called the Telegoons, which was puppets of the Goon Show, which in those days was quite successful. But you had to have a union ticket. It was very strict, catch-22. If you didn't have a ticket, you couldn't work. And vice versa. How do you get hold of one of these things? He phoned me while I was in the office one day and said, "If you can get down to this small studio in Fulham," he said, "they've offered me a job, which I don't want, and you might better get in." And so I walked into this studio, and there were lights and guys in T-shirts, bearing in mind I'd come from an office where people wore ties.
Yeah.
And everybody was Mr. I was never called Barrie, I was Mr. Dodd, That sounds strange how formal it was. And I walked into this fantastic sort of looking studio.
How old were you?
I was sort of early 20s.
Right.
And the chap walked up and said, "Hi, my name's Bill." And I said, "Oh, hello, Bill." And I could see I was going to get nowhere with this because there was a chap there who really knew what he was doing. And they loaded the cameras and with film. One was a 60mm camera and the other was the 35mm camera. And I stood back and watched them. And they were very busy at the time. They were actually shooting some stuff in the studio while we were being talked to. And he said, "Look, we can't do this now. Could you all three come back tomorrow?" Which was a Saturday. And I'd always worked on Saturdays. And I said, "Yeah, I'll try." And I thought, "There's pointless going back, really, because it's not going to happen." Anyway, I did. I went back. And it was only two, just me and this other chap. And the guy that knew everything had phoned in to say that he'd pranked his car and he couldn't make it. And I thought, oh, interesting. So I just blagged and I got the job. But it was very poorly paid. And the promise was after 2 years, you would get a union ticket. And
2 years?
Yeah, 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's some time, isn't it?
It was a long time, yeah. But I took one look at it, and bearing in mind I'd been managing an agency, and I was, quite high up in what I was doing. So I had to take a massive hit in every direction. But I've just loved it.
Something told you that was the right direction for you.
Yeah, it just seemed right.
Was it straight into the music business end of film?
Interestingly enough, it was very generic. It was a studio that had a lot of work for the COI in those days, the Central Office of Information. So they had a contract that kept going, which included lots of music, and it was a bit like Tomorrow's World. There were gadgets and things, and it was a propaganda program for the England, British Isles, I suppose. So you saw everything really in terms of people coming in and singing and bands and whatever, and lots of other things. It was fascinating actually.
What year was that roughly?
Oh gosh, 66, 67, I suppose.
All right. So fast forward 8 years, and you're filming Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
The video.
Yeah.
Probably the first bit of film to be called a promotional video, wasn't it?
Well, we'd been shooting stuff anyway with Olivia Newton-John and with the lovely director Bruce Gowers, who was the director on Bohemian Rhapsody, and he was a real character, great director, So we've been shooting stuff with him, and it just went from there, really. So it wasn't the first thing we'd done, but I think because we'd gained a bit of a reputation of being able to move quickly and do things on the hoof. And bearing in mind that in those days, all companies in broadcast television were known names. Obviously the BBC, but there was Yorkshire, Tyne Tees, there was Westwood,
Granada, and
a lot.
Yeah.
And it was because it was broadcast television. Everybody was trained either at the BBC or one of those places. Well, I'd come out of a different mould because I'd come into a film studio, so I understood a lot about emulsion and cameras in that sense. And it was still black and white in those days when I was doing it, so we were still swinging lenses.
Right.
And which I quite enjoy. It's a great discipline, and so it was embedded into me what a lens does. I've always said with cameras, there's only 3 things you need to know: is what a lens does, what it doesn't do, and where to put it. And if you get that right, everything else you can get away with.
We've got to remember that, Dave.
Well, that's only my philosophy, because I'm not, strangely enough, with all the things I've done, I'm not very technical at all.
Really?
I mean, I can mend a plug, but and I could get my, I can make things work. But
Is it about your kind of creative eye?
I just love what the camera does, and there are so many types of cameras, and they all have their own advantages. And nowadays, cameras pretty well. I mean, the contrast ratio that we had was just zilch almost.
Yeah.
I remember doing when we first went colour in this studio from black and white film. I'm talking 16mm. We used to work in foot candles, right?
4 candles.
4 candles. 4 candles. Yeah. Basically, it was a way of measuring the light. And nowadays, I mean, I don't know what this would be in here, but it won't be quite low. It's probably about 20-foot candles or something like that, I suppose. Maybe a bit more.
I don't know. We would work in ISO.
Well,
and
this is it, yeah. Well, we lit to 1,250-foot candles. I mean, we had brutes. The brute was a big 20k lamp, carbon arcs, and you had to light with those, and the heat was unbearable. That was just to get an exposure on the 16mm film. It actually melted the emulsion on the film. You had to stop every 2 minutes.
Wow.
And cool down. I mean, it was very basic stuff when you think about it.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose the cameras were bigger, heavier.
Massive. Huge.
Yeah.
It took 2 men to lift them.
What kit did you use on Bohemian Rhapsody?
Well,
Can you remember?
That's another story, really, because we were, because I've diverted from what I was saying about the broadcast companies. We were a facility company. Something. Well, Bohemian Rhapsody happened probably within 24 hours. We got a call saying, could we do it? Well, we run out of cameras. We just sold a truck, and we didn't have anything. And we went to Hewitt Studio, which is now Capitol Studios in Wandsworth, and we managed to blag a Fernseh German camera from him. We had 2 cameras left ourselves, which was an LDK-13 and a Philips PC-80. It was that none of these cameras on paper matched. In those days, very strict that you couldn't do it. But the engineers, with their skill, matched those cameras.
Right.
And they put that in. We went in the morning, and by 4 o'clock the director turned up, and by about 8 or 9 o'clock we were ready to go down the pub. We just rushed it.
So it was all shot in a day.
Yeah, very much.
What were the setups? Because I reminded myself of the visuals.
Yeah.
Because I probably haven't seen it since 1974. But
don't look too closely.
No, but it's obviously got the iconic kind of foreheads.
Yeah.
The kind of the foreheads together.
We managed to get a multi-prism lens from a chap at Elstree. We knew the senior cameraman there, and he had one, and we brought it down, and somebody provided a frame for it, but it didn't work, so we just held it in front of the camera, just literally held it there and did it like that. It was done like, yeah, we got it right, done. And the video howl round was.
Is that when you get that tracer off of?
Yeah, well, it's like a sound howl round. If you put a microphone and feed it into
like
itself,
feedback, basically.
It's feedback. Yeah. And when you look at it, it looks so simple, but it was quite hard because it was running all over the place.
Right, yeah.
And to get it at the right moment.
Because I suppose it must have been after that time on Top of the Pops they used that effect quite a lot, didn't they? Do you reckon that was inspired by? your efforts
I'm
there
sure
that day?
You know, I don't know. But people tried everything. We were trying also with Kate Bush when we shot Wuthering Heights. You know, we'd seen this 16mm.
Hang on a second.
Sorry.
Wuthering Heights.
Yeah.
The Kate Bush video with Wuthering Heights
Yeah.
and all of the arms.
Yeah. It was this great idea
Wow.
because I'd seen. Well, the director on that was brilliant again, a chap called Keith McMillan, very clever man, and but that was inspired, I think, by a 16mm ballet film called Pas de Deux, where they step printed all the movements. We used a very basic system with Mike Oldfield when we shot at Dulce Dobile down at his place in wherever it was, Cotswolds. We had to mat that. I had got a black mat out of the Volkswagen, cut a card up, matted it onto the pitch.
A floor mat from a car.
Yeah. But we
when you say black mat, I thought you literally mean a black mat out of a car.
Yeah. Well, the thing was, you had to point a camera at the background, and basically, that was in 9 parts, I think, because he played every instrument on that.
Yeah.
And in those days, nowadays you just do a multi, you could do it easily, but then you had to key that image into one corner and then key the other bit and key the other bit, and it took all day to do that. But we made the mat up from a car mat.
Literally.
Yeah.
So you, now I've because I thought I'd researched you slightly on IMDb, so I've seen a bit of stuff come up, but Kate Bush wasn't on there.
I don't know,
Mike Oldfield wasn't on
there's
there.
Loads that's not on there. There's loads. Most of it's not on there. I don't.
You've done ELO.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah.
ELO.
Yeah.
Have you ever worked with David Bowie?
Yeah. I did the Glass Spider tour. Yeah, and I did Heroes. Yeah.
Well, you might have to come back.
Yeah. So much stuff.
And Monty Python.
Yeah. And we shot the recent one at the O2 when they all came together. You know.
All right.
Yeah. That's. No, we shot. I shot the Goon Show once, and I'm trying to think. There's so much. It's like.
Have you ever written a book?
No.
Do you feel the urge? Or have people said, "Go on, you've got to write a book"?
The thing is, people do say that, but I don't know who'd be interested in that sense, because it's mostly anecdotes really about this. Every shoot you do, there's something going on that makes you laugh or do something. I mean, my first day, it's my 2 days after joining that studio in Fulham, and about the 3rd day in, I'd parked my little car, a little Fiat, and next to it was a little Volkswagen, and a little old chap got out with a suitcase and a lady, and she picked up a Moses basket with a baby in. And I thought, it's very early in the morning, I thought they looked a bit lost. Anyway, I went in the stage door of the studio. 2 minutes later, they came in. I thought, they've lost their way. It was a knife-throwing act. By 9 o'clock, he was throwing knives at her, and she would say stop, and she'd go and feed the baby, and say, okay, ready again. And and he was throwing, and then the director said, we've got enough of that, we've got everything we need for the bit that we're trying to say. And the chap said, but you haven't seen the hatchets yet, I've got flaming hatchets. And I thought, I love this job. I mean, 3 weeks
so
later,
a young mum turning up at a sound stage, puts the baby down,
that's right.
gets the knives but not the hatchets thrown at her.
Yeah, by the husband.
By the husband.
Yeah. At 9 o'clock in the morning. At 9 o'clock in the morning. By 10 o'clock it was all over, and I thought, who does this sort of work? Who, it's better than working in an office, isn't it?
I suspect that there are stories that you could tell that you probably wouldn't want to.
Oh, don't know,
When you did Bohemian Rhapsody and you said you were down the pub by.
Well,
Did Freddie and the boys go? Or was that?
No. They were very professional, brilliant blokes to work with, really good guys.
Have you seen the film? Have you seen the film recently?
Do you know what? It's interesting enough. My family said to me, we've booked tickets to go and see it. And I said, because I'd shot a load of videos with them and all their a lot of the concerts, I said, I'd probably spoil it for me. And they said, come along. And actually, I quite enjoyed it.
So you have seen it?
I have seen it, yeah. And after about 10 minutes, I was really... I mean, it's about the music. It is about the music. But I thought it was very well done, actually. And it just made me laugh because John Deacon looks more like John Deacon than he did.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
I mean, the casting was just brilliant.
Brian May, I thought Brian May was brilliant, but
Yeah.
then when they went to the later years and John Deacon's hair grew,
Yeah.
you couldn't tell the difference
It's
between.
brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I was mesmerised by it all, really. And again, the music's wonderful, so I can see why it worked. But initially, I thought it'd be quite a difficult thing to do.
Did you have anything to do with Live Aid?
Do you know what? On Live Aid, I did, but it was done by the BBC. I'd shot a lot of the other concerts at Wembley, and if my wife was in there, she'd say, "Yes, you did it." But do you know what? I have to think about it. So I remember, I'd have to think about that one.
1983.
It was 1984.
I remember dragging the telly into the garden
Did you really?
and put a nice bit of shade
Yeah.
over it because it was a nice.
Yeah.
It was a hot day, wasn't it?
It was a very hot day. I did shoot a load of stuff on it, but I remember seeing it, and I wasn't. I shouldn't say this on camera really, but the I thought it was very much just put together quickly. You know, it was. I was used to working with concerts where you had a lot of control, and those guys didn't.
It was thrown together, wasn't it?
It was really, and
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thing that he did and all the rest of it. But it was.
It was very slapdash on the day. I remember there were lots of, loads of feedback and delays and all sorts of stuff,
well,
wasn't
again,
there?
bless them, they'd come there with their gear. See, we were used to, the sort of company that I was with, we used to we could sort of do that stuff. And we did subsequent concerts there with Freddie and all the rest of them. But Live Aid, no, I'd have to really think about that.
I had a friend that used to work sound desk,
All right.
a guy called Andrew Fringley. And he's done loads and loads of concerts, lots of stuff at the old Hammersmith Odeon and Wembley and stuff like that. And he said he did Oasis, and he said it was the loudest band he'd ever heard, and he had to kind of keep a lid on it.
Yeah.
Is there anything? Have you got any sort of memories of extremes
Well,
from?
they were. I mean, Ted Nugent was the one, wasn't he? Where he said, if it's too loud, you're too old. But it had its moments, and of course we worked right through the 70s and 80s and 90s. In fact, I'm still doing stuff. You know, I was with Nick Mason the other day at the Roundhouse shooting some stuff.
So you're still taking on work,
Yeah.
even though you probably don't need to.
Well, do you know, I don't have any hobbies. Not that I want any hobbies, and I find it quite stimulating. In fact, I find it quite scary, if I'm honest with you.
I mean, you're talking about lots of television and live performances and productions and things like that. But the music side of it, obviously, when you're doing concerts and you're doing other stuff like that, have you ever got kind of sucked into that kind of, the rock and roll lifestyle? Have you ever?
No, it's a funny thing. I don't know why, that people assume you've been rushing around doing all sorts of things. I mean, I've never taken any drugs or anything like that. I mean, we all go down the pub and have a few beers, but that's about as rock and roll as I get. And
So that strikes me as being quite,
Well,
because you must have been quite kind of strong-willed,
no, not really.
or was it just not?
I think what it was, I mean, there are moments. There's one, I mean, I don't have any regrets anyway, but there was one moment that I wondered what I should have done. We did a fantastic shoot at, where was it, Stonebridge Park with The Who. And it was at the days when they smashed everything to pieces. And so they had a big audience. And as the concert was finishing, they broke everything up. There were guitars going, speakers going.
Just shove them in the amplifiers,
It was
didn't
really. And as we finished, I'd been on some sort of handheld camera, and Keith Moon came up and said, "We're going to have a party. You're coming to a party."
Uh-oh.
And I said, "I can't. I've got to take all these camera stuff." He said, "Yeah, come, we're all going." And I said, "Sorry, mate, I can't come." But I often wonder what it would have been like to go to
Mooney the Looney.
Yeah, he's good, nice bloke. But
Didn't he live on Eel Pie Island?
do you know?
Or-
I don't know.
Because there's a weird story that's been going around
Well,
about Keith Moon living on Eel Pie Island for a little bit.
Do you know? I've never heard that one. It wouldn't surprise me.
But apparently he lived there. I don't know how true this is. And apparently he had an aviary
All right.
with green parrots in.
Really?
Yeah.
That makes sense, then, doesn't it?
And apparently one day he got a bit sort of messed up, a bit wrecked, and let all his parrots go. This
It's a
paper.
good story.
No, but you know the green parrots
Yeah.
that fly around here.
We're everywhere. They're over in North London at
Yeah.
the moment. Yeah.
There was a story that they'd come off the set for African Queen
All right.
with Humphrey Bogart,
Yeah,
which was
Shepperton.
filmed at Shepperton.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that wasn't
Yeah.
true.
No.
So the most recent story of where the green parrots have come from were Keith Moon's aviary on.
Well, that's a very good story, and
even if it's not true, it sounds good, doesn't it?
Well, why not?
I'm going to ask you one last thing. Having you on talking about Bohemian Rhapsody is just like the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? As far as what you've actually done is concerned.
Well,
Well, do you have one thing that kind of jumps out and you go, right, that's never going to leave me?
Well, the one that probably the most concentrated was I did the opening of the Olympics for Danny Boyle.
Oh yeah, the opening of the Olympics.
Yeah. and
Bloody hell.
It was so interesting. It's fascinating. I put about I think it's 34 cameras I put on it. I was camera supervisor on most of these jobs, and I still operate as well. And we were.
So 2012, you're up at the Olympic Park.
Well, I was up there for I don't know 2 or 3 weeks beforehand. We were rehearsing in Dagenham, and the amazing part about it was all kept secret, and there were most of the people in that were amateur people that came along, nurses and people, and
they kept stum.
They all kept stum. It was brilliant, and we were in Dagenham. We built two actual arenas with scaffolding towers for the cameras to go on, so you could leapfrog them to rehearse. And there's a couple of great moments in that. You
must have had lots of stand-ins for, like Spice Girls stand-ins on the taxis and all of that sort of stuff when you were rehearsing.
You got all that stuff, yeah. Of course,
that would be a good claim to fame.
Well, I did the Spice Girls. They did load their stuff. They're nice girls as well. But the Olympics was really fascinating to me, and they built this fantastic dome.
Is that because of the scale of it?
Yeah, and it's also live. I kept saying to people, it's live. People forget 3 hours live. And it was very complicated because Danny had written this wonderful sort of complicated script.
It's easy to forget, isn't it? Because it was mammoth. It was a real big deal, wasn't it? Nothing like that had ever been done at the Olympics before.
Well, they built this stage in Montreal. It came over in about a shipload of 58 containers, and they built this dome. And the point loading on that dome was 4 or 5 tons because they had cart horses walking around on top of it. You remember the English countryside and various scenes that were done on there.
Yes.
Plus 5,000 dancers jumping up and down on it. And it was brilliant. It was honeycombed with steel with 4x2 holes in it, built by a Canadian company. And I was there for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it was under the... it was a building site in terms of the insurance and things like that. So we had very strict instructions what we couldn't do. And I had to go and measure things because my job was all, again, come back to lenses, it's all measurements. And I had to go inside the dome. It was pouring me rain one day. And I had to go inside there because I talked to the director, who was Hamish Hamilton, actually directed the live event. And Danny was the creative director. And I said, I've got to get this, because I had to get the measurements right for the rings to go up, and we used a thing called a tower cam, and so I was going to basically make a hole in this thing so this thing could come up, and so the lid would close afterwards on 2 bits. And I thought, I don't know how to do this, because the whole of the people that were building it they'd come from Belgium or somewhere. It wasn't easy to just go up and chat to somebody. And as I was walking in and wondering how I was going to do it, a little guy comes towards me, and we all had the yellow helmets and the glasses and the
safety gear,
everything. He said, "Hey, Barrie." And I said, "Hey, it's Paul." I said, "Hi, Paul." And I'd worked on the Cirque du Soleil for a lot of years with him. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Barrie, I built this." I said, "Can I cut a hole in this bit?" He said, "Tell me what you want to do." And I thought, fantastic. So I got.
So because of this guy that had produced or worked on Cirque du Soleil with you. That's another. It's just blowing my mind.
Well, it's just one of those stories that I remember that as being just a great moment for me, because it allowed me to get on with some stuff.
Cutting a hole in Paul's dome.
Yeah, exactly where I wanted it. I mean, there was guys there with angle grinders. Bearing in mind, this thing was seriously put together.
And expensive, probably.
Yeah. And the other great moment in that for me, and I was that. When we had our first meeting, it was all very secret. We had to sign lots of, obviously, documents to say that he kept it all under wraps, which was wonderful. But there was this huge table when we first went in with all the various experts, which had to be there. The riggers, the guys that do all the rig, everything. It was very complicated, sound, vision. And of course, there was my job was cameras, and we had to go for this big meeting on the first day, and everybody was asked around this table, and I don't know how many people there were. There's got to be 30 people. You know, what do you do? And so and so with it, and so your time, working out what everybody was doing. And it came to me, and I said, "It's Barrie, Barrie Dodd cameras," and I sat back like you do. The executive producer got up and said, "Right, let's start this. Barrie, where are you going to put your cameras?" And I almost died because I knew what I wanted to do with Hamish, because Hamish was the director on it, obviously. And I just stood up, and somewhere from out of my mouth came the words, "Would somebody like to tell me where I can't put them?"
And genius.
It was genius. And I'm not a genius. But the brilliant part about it, the three guys got up and said, "Are you sure?" And they tried to, because they were building all the machinery, you see. I just sat back and gave me time to think, because we had a plan. But I was no way going to be able to nail it in one meeting. You can't just say that, because people say you change your mind. It was hard to do that. It was very complicated. But
I'm going to try and remember. I'll try and remember that.
It's
just
one that is
you could apply that to
anything
to get you out of
Yeah.
jail free,
Yeah.
wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Barrie Dodd, thank you.
No, pleasure.
Really,
Bore you to tears.
thank you. I hope you can come back soon, and I hope you, I hope you keep doing what you're doing. I really look forward to hearing about the next thing.
Every job's my last job.
Do you say that all the time?
Yeah.
Well, I hope not.
Yeah.
Thanks, Barrie.
No, pleasure.
Nice one. All done.